Betrayed and thrown into the streets by her husband, heartbroken nurse with young son receives mysterious offer from elderly patient. What she discovered inside his house left her completely speechless. Sarah Mitchell stared at the unfamiliar pink lace lingerie mixed in with the laundry. Her hands trembled as she placed it on top of the washing machine. After 12 years of marriage, she knew every piece of clothing in their home. This wasn't hers. "Mommy, I had the bad dream again," Tommy called from the doorway, clutching his worn teddy bear. At 6, he was already too perceptive for his own good. "Come here, sweetheart." Sarah knelt to hug him, pushing thoughts of the lingerie aside. Was it about Daddy again? Tommy nodded against her shoulder. "He was leaving with the mean lady. Why does he keep leaving with her in my dreams?" Sarah's heart clenched. For weeks now, Tommy had been having the same nightmare. She'd dismissed it as normal childhood anxiety, but now, looking at the lingerie, "Let's get you back to bed. You have school tomorrow, and I have the night shift at the hospital." After tucking Tommy in, Sarah checked their savings account on her phone. The balance made her stomach drop. Half of the money they'd saved for Tommy's adenoid surgery was gone. Derek had said he'd transferred it to a better-yielding account, but he'd never shown her the paperwork. At the hospital that night, Sarah's head spun as she prepared medications for her patients in the geriatric ward. The dizziness had been getting worse lately, but she couldn't afford to take time off. Every extra shift meant more money for Tommy's surgery. "You don't look well, dear." Mrs. Anderson, her favorite patient, reached for her hand. "I see big changes coming for you. Be prepared." Sarah forced a smile. "Just tired, Mrs. Anderson. Nothing to worry about." Walking past the nurse's station, she overheard Derek's voice from Jennifer's phone. Her best friend quickly ended the call when she saw Sarah. "Was that Derek?" Sarah asked. "Oh, just about the house he's showing her tomorrow," Jennifer answered too quickly. "You know how it is in real estate." Later that night, Sarah found bank statements in Derek's drawer while putting away laundry. The numbers didn't match their joint account records. There were transfers to unknown accounts and charges at restaurants she'd never been to. Her wedding ring felt heavy on her finger as she remembered last week's canceled dinner. Another late showing, Derek had claimed. The missing jewelry she'd attributed to misplacement. The whispered phone calls. The password changed on their joint account. The signs had been there all along. She'd ignored them, working double shifts instead of facing the truth. Single mothers made up half her geriatric patient stories. Women who'd had to rebuild their lives after losing everything. "It won't happen to me," Sarah whispered to herself, sliding the bank statements back into the drawer. "I'm just tired and imagining things." But that night at work, another dizzy spell hit her as she administered medication. The vial slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. As she cleaned up the mess, her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Everything she'd worked for, their home, Tommy's surgery fund, their future, was built on a foundation that felt increasingly unstable. But Sarah straightened her uniform and continued her rounds. Her patients needed her, and Tommy needed his surgery. She couldn't afford to fall apart, even as her world showed the first cracks of impending collapse. She didn't know it yet, but in less than 24 hours, those cracks would split her life wide open. After a 16-hour double shift, Sarah pulled into her driveway at 7 a.m. The first sign something was wrong was the empty garbage bins. Derek always forgot trash day. 2 police cars waited in front of her house. Her key didn't work in the lock. "Mrs. Mitchell?" An officer approached. "We received a call about disturbing behavior. Your husband reports you've been acting erratically, making threats." Sarah stared at the changed locks, her exhausted mind struggling to process the scene. "I don't understand. I just finished my shift at the hospital." "Step back from the door, ma'am." The officer positioned himself between Sarah and her home. "Mr. Mitchell has filed a temporary restraining order." "Restraining order?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Where's my son?" "Safe with his father." Another officer handed her papers. You've been documented having angry outbursts at work, mishandling medications. There are concerns about your mental stability. Sarah's phone buzzed. Her banking app showed a zero balance. The savings account for Tommy's surgery, empty. Her credit card, declined. This is a mistake. Sarah tried to steady her voice. I need to see my son. Sarah! Jennifer's voice came from the doorway. She stood next to Derek, her hand on his arm. We're worried about you. The overtime, the mood swings, the prescription drugs. Prescription drugs? Sarah's knees weakened. Jennifer, what are you talking about? Show them your bag, Derek called out. Show them what you took from the hospital. The officers moved toward her purse. Sarah clutched it tighter, mind racing. Derek had access to her work schedule, her bank accounts, her entire life. Search it. Sarah thrust her bag at the officers. Search everything. They found nothing. But the damage was done. Neighbors filmed from their windows. Hospital security would hear about this. Her reputation, career, everything she'd built. Derek had planned this methodically. Here are your things. Derek dropped 2 suitcases on the porch. One contained her clothes, the other Tommy's. The court date is in the papers. Until then, stay away from us. Daddy? Tommy's voice came from inside. Is that Mommy? Go back inside, buddy, Derek called, but Tommy ran out. Tommy, no! Jennifer tried to grab him. Sarah saw her best friend reach for her son and something snapped. Don't touch him. See her aggression? Derek pulled out his phone, recording. This is what I've been dealing with. Tommy reached Sarah, wrapping his arms around her legs. Don't go, Mommy. Get him inside, Derek barked at Jennifer. Now! The officers stepped between Sarah and Tommy. She watched her son being pulled away, his screams piercing the morning air. You'll hear from my lawyer, Derek said, closing the door. Sarah stood on her porch, clutching the restraining order. No money, no access to her home, no evidence of Derek's manipulation. Even her best friend had betrayed her. Her phone buzzed again. The hospital director. Concerning reports about this morning's incident, come to my office immediately. Sarah loaded the suitcases into her car, her scrubs still on from her shift. The dizziness returned, stronger than ever. She gripped the car door, fighting unconsciousness. Inside the house, her house, she heard Tommy crying. On the porch where she'd kissed Derek goodbye just yesterday, Jennifer now stood guard. 12 years of marriage, 16 years of friendship, all built on lies. As Sarah pulled away, she glimpsed Derek holding Tommy at the window. Her son's small hand pressed against the glass, his tears matching her own. She had no idea where she would sleep tonight, how she would fight the charges, or when she would hold her boy again. The life she'd known was gone, destroyed by the 2 people she'd trusted most, and this was only the beginning of their plan. Sarah parked her car in the farthest corner of the hospital garage. 3 nights of sleeping in the back seat had left her barely functional. Tommy's suitcase served as her pillow, still carrying his scent. Just 5 more minutes, she whispered to herself, fighting another wave of dizziness. Her shift started in 20 minutes. Her phone showed 5 missed calls from the hospital director. The restraining order and Derek's accusations had triggered an internal investigation. Her colleagues now watched her every move, waiting for mistakes. The car sputtered when she tried to start it. The check engine light had been on for 2 days. She couldn't afford repairs, the credit cards were maxed, and her next paycheck would go straight to lawyer fees. Inside the hospital, Jennifer stood at the nurse's station. Sarah's been taking medications from the storage, she told a group of staff. I've seen her pocket pills during shifts. Sarah walked past them, head high. In the medication room, her hands shook as she prepared dosages. The room spun. She grabbed the counter, but it was too late. The crash of falling vials brought people running. Sarah lay on the floor. Mrs. Anderson's heart medication shattered beside her. I'm calling security, Jennifer announced. She's a danger to patients. No, Sarah tried to stand. I just got dizzy. The hospital director appeared in the doorway. My office. Now, in his office, the director placed a document on the desk. Multiple incidents reported, erratic behavior, missing medications. We're suspending you pending investigation. The medications aren't missing, Sarah pleaded. Check the logs. Check the cameras. We did. Records show discrepancies during your shifts. The director sighed. Your badge, Sarah. Outside, rain poured. Sarah sat in her car, watching her phone battery die. The temperature dropped. Tommy would be going to bed now. Did Derek remember his allergy medicine? His favorite bedtime story? A knock on her window made her jump. Security guard. Can't sleep here, ma'am. Hospital policy. Sarah drove to a Walmart parking lot. At midnight, Tommy's fever started. Mommy, I don't feel good, he whimpered from the back seat. We'll get through this, baby. Sarah checked his temperature, 102 degrees. She had Tylenol in her purse, but no water. The nearest shelter turned her away. Your husband called, said you're violent, unstable. We can't risk our other residents. By morning, Tommy's fever broke, but Sarah's dizziness worsened. She dropped him at school, promising to pick him up, hiding that they had nowhere to go. At the legal aid office, more bad news. Derek's documented everything. Your outbursts, the hospital incidents. He's filing for full custody. They're lies, Sarah whispered. He planned this with Jennifer. It's your word against theirs. And with your job suspension, Sarah's vision blurred. The room tilted. Ma'am, are you okay? She wasn't. The floor rushed up to meet her. She woke to paramedics. Not her hospital. They'd taken her to County General. Blood pressure dangerously low, someone said. Signs of exhaustion, malnutrition. My son, Sarah tried to sit up. I have to pick up Tommy. You're not going anywhere. The doctor checked her pupils. We're admitting you. I can't. Sarah pulled out her IV. His school calls Derek if I'm late. I can't give him another reason. She made it to Tommy's school, just as Derek's car pulled up. See? He told the principal. Unstable, living in her car. This is why I need emergency custody. Tommy ran to Sarah, but a teacher held him back. Mommy! His scream followed her as she stumbled to her car. That night, Sarah parked behind the hospital again. Her chest hurt. Her head pounded. In her rearview mirror, she looked like one of her elderly patients. 3 days. She'd lost her home, job, son, and dignity in just 3 days. A tap on her window, security again. Please, she whispered. Just one night. Rules are rules, he said. But his eyes showed pity. Sarah started the car. The engine made a terrible sound, then died completely. Like her life, it had finally given out. Sarah slipped into Memorial Hospital through the staff entrance. She couldn't afford to lose her last remaining connection to her profession, visiting her former patients. Security looked the other way when she visited Mr. Wilson, an elderly patient who'd specifically requested her presence. Just checking his vitals, she told the night nurse, who nodded sympathetically. Mr. Wilson lay still in his bed, monitors beeping steadily. At 78, he'd been admitted for heart complications 3 months ago. Sarah adjusted his pillow, noting the irregular pattern on his heart monitor. Margaret, he mumbled in his sleep. The paintings. Tell her about the paintings. Sarah checked his pulse. Too weak. His skin felt clammy. The monitor alarm screamed. Flatline. Code blue, Sarah shouted, starting chest compressions. I need help in here. The crash team rushed in, but Sarah kept counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. Step aside, a doctor ordered. No, Sarah continued compressions. I know his rhythm. Just get the defibrillator ready. Minutes stretched. Sarah's arms burned. Her vision blurred, but she wouldn't stop. 9 minutes. 10. 11. Call it, someone said. No, Sarah pressed harder. Come on, Mr. Wilson. Margaret needs you. Remember Margaret? His body jerked. A heartbeat appeared. Impossible, the doctor muttered. After 12 minutes, Sarah collapsed into a chair as Mr. Wilson stabilized. The room spun violently. You. Mr. Wilson's eyes opened, fixing on Sarah. Margaret said you'd come tonight. "Sir, you need rest," the doctor interjected. "Leave us," Mr. Wilson commanded with surprising strength. The medical team retreated. "Your husband took everything," Mr. Wilson stated. "The house, money, your reputation. You're sleeping in your car with Tommy." Sarah stiffened. "How did you—" "Margaret tells me things." He reached for her hand. "You saved my life tonight. Now let me save yours." "Mr. Wilson, James," he corrected. "And I know about the dizziness, the chest pains. You need help before it's too late." A figure seemed to move in the corner of the room. Sarah blinked. "I have a property outside town," Mr. Wilson continued. "A cottage where Margaret used to paint. It's yours if you want it." "I couldn't," Margaret insisted. He smiled mysteriously. "She's very persistent." "Margaret passed 5 years ago," Sarah said gently, wondering if his brain had been affected by the cardiac arrest. "Did she?" His eyes twinkled. "Then how did she tell me about the lingerie you found? About Jennifer and Derek's plan?" Sarah's legs weakened. "That's impossible. The cottage has been waiting for someone like you, someone who needs a fresh start." He pressed a key into her hand. "Take Tommy there tonight, before Derek files those new papers tomorrow morning." "What papers?" "Claiming you kidnapped Tommy from school. Jennifer forged your signature on documents. They're moving to California next week." Sarah's chest tightened. "How could you know?" "Margaret knows." Mr. Wilson's voice grew urgent. "The cottage. Go now. Everything you need is there. But your condition—" "I'll be fine." He squeezed her hand. "The address is with the key. Don't tell anyone where you're going. And Sarah, check the studio in the attic first. Margaret left something for you." "Sir, I don't understand." "You will." His eyes drifted to the corner where Sarah had seen movement. "Won't she, Margaret?" A cold breeze brushed Sarah's neck. The monitors flickered. "Go," Mr. Wilson insisted. "Get Tommy, now, before it's too late." Sarah stumbled from the room, key clutched in her hand. The hallway spun, but adrenaline carried her forward. She had to get to Tommy's school, had to beat Derek's plan one more time. Behind her, she could have sworn she heard a woman's voice. "Hurry, child, they're coming." But when she turned, there was only the empty hospital corridor and the fading sound of Mr. Wilson's heart monitor, beeping out a rhythm that seemed to say, "Run, now, run, now, run." Sarah reached Tommy's school just before the morning bell. Her heart pounded as she parked behind the building, out of sight from the main entrance. "Mrs. Mitchell?" The school secretary frowned when Sarah entered. "We have strict instructions. Call the police if you want," Sarah interrupted. "But first, read this." She handed over Derek's travel documents, showing his planned move to California. "He forged my signature. I have rights." The secretary studied the papers. "Tommy's in room 102. Sarah ran through the hallway. Tommy looked up as she entered his classroom. "Get your backpack, baby. We're going on an adventure." He didn't question her, didn't hesitate, just grabbed his things and took her hand. They reached the car just as the school's front doors burst open. Derek stormed out, Jennifer behind him. "Drive," Tommy whispered. "They look mad." Sarah's hands shook as she followed Mr. Wilson's directions. The old Honda struggled up the country road, Derek's BMW gaining in her rearview mirror. "Turn here." Tommy pointed to a hidden driveway she'd almost missed. The gravel path wound through dense trees. Derek's car sped past, missing the turn. "How did you know?" Sarah asked. "The lady in my dream showed me." Tommy smiled. "She looks like the pictures in your wallet, the ones of Grandma. Sarah's mother had died years ago. She kept no photos in her wallet." The trees opened to reveal a clearing. Sarah hit the brakes. This was no cottage. A 2-story house stood before them, white walls gleaming in the morning sun. Wraparound porch, French windows, a rose garden, dormant but well-tended. "My room's upstairs." Tommy jumped out, running toward the house. "Tommy, wait, how do you—" He was already through the front door, which had swung open at his approach. Inside, Sarah froze. Polished hardwood floors, antique furniture, dusty but intact. A grandfather clock ticked in the corner, showing the correct time despite years of abandonment. "Look, Mommy," Tommy called from upstairs. "My bed has a rocket ship cover." Sarah climbed the stairs. Tommy stood in a boy's bedroom, decorated with space-themed wallpaper and vintage toy rockets. "This was all here?" Sarah whispered. "The lady said it's mine now, like it was waiting." A thud from above made them both jump. "The attic," Sarah remembered Mr. Wilson's words. "Stay here, Tommy." The attic stairs creaked under her feet. Her chest tightened. From fear or her worsening condition, she wasn't sure. The attic was a fully equipped art studio. Easels, paint boxes, canvases everywhere. On a desk lay a letter, the paper yellow with age. "Dear Sarah," it began. "If you're reading this, you found your way home. The paintings will protect you, but be careful. They'll come for them, just like they came for me. Trust James. Watch for my signs. And Sarah, check behind the third canvas on the left wall. You'll need what's there tonight. Margaret." The third canvas concealed a wall safe. "The combination is Tommy's birthday," a voice whispered. Sarah spun around. Empty room. Her fingers shook as she tried the numbers. The safe clicked open. Inside, legal documents, property deeds, old photographs, and a newspaper clipping from 1943. Local artist exposes Nazi art theft ring. Margaret Wilson forces corrupt officials into hiding. Headlights swept the driveway. Sarah ran to the window. 3 cars. Derek, Jennifer. 2 men she didn't recognize. "They're here," Tommy called from below. Sarah grabbed the safe's contents and rushed downstairs. Tommy stood calmly by the front door. "Don't worry," he said. "The lady says they can't come in. The house won't let them." On cue, every door and window in the house locked simultaneously. The lights flickered once. Outside, Derek pounded on the door. "Sarah, you can't hide forever." But as Sarah held Tommy close, watching their pursuers through the window, she felt something she hadn't in days. Safe. The house seemed to pulse around them, like a living thing, like it had been waiting all these years for precisely this moment. For them. Derek and his group left after an hour of futile attempts to enter the house. Sarah spent the night reading Margaret's documents, each revelation more shocking than the last. Her phone rang at dawn. The hospital. "Mr. Wilson had another episode," the nurse reported. "He's asking for you. Tell him I'm safe. We both are." "Sarah, wait. There's something else. Your test results from your fainting spell. You need to come in immediately." The line went dead. The house's lights flickered. "Mommy?" Tommy stood in the doorway. "Someone's in the garden." Sarah rushed to the window. 2 men in dark suits photographed the property. "Not Derek's people. These move differently. Professional." "Get your shoes," Sarah told Tommy. "We need to check on Mr. Wilson." The hospital corridor was empty when they arrived. Too empty. "Stay close," Sarah whispered to Tommy. They found Mr. Wilson's room guarded by 2 men similar to those at the house. "James Wilson?" One blocked their path. "Under family custody now. No visitors." Through the door's window, Sarah saw Mr. Wilson gesturing frantically before a man in a suit injected something into his IV. "He's having a stroke." Sarah pushed past the guard. Mr. Wilson's monitors screamed. Staff rushed in as he convulsed. "Margaret's paintings," he gasped between seizures. "Nazi treasury. Jennifer knows." The guards grabbed Sarah's arms. Tommy screamed. "Let her go." A security guard Sarah knew intervened. "She's his nurse." Sarah reached Mr. Wilson just as his eyes rolled back. "Studio wall," he whispered. "Behind the blue canvas." The guards advanced again, but hospital security held them back. "Those men tried to hurt him," Tommy pointed. "The lady in white saw them." But when others looked, the suspicious men had vanished. Sarah's phone buzzed. "Jennifer, I know what Margaret hid." Jennifer's voice shook. "Derek's working with them, the Wilson family. They're not who you think. I'm pregnant with twins, Sarah. They'll kill them if I don't help. The paintings." The call cut off. "Mrs. Mitchell?" A doctor approached. "About your test results. We found a mass in your heart. It's rare, aggressive. Without immediate treatment, the room spun. Sarah grabbed the wall. There's more. The doctor lowered his voice. The tumor's shape. It matches a genetic marker we've only seen once before, in Margaret Wilson's records. Tommy tugged Sarah's sleeve. Mommy, she says to check the birth certificates, the ones in the safe. Sarah pulled out Margaret's documents with trembling hands. Her mother's birth certificate was on top. Father, unknown. Mother, Margaret Wilson. Impossible, Sarah whispered. My mother was adopted. Mr. Wilson stirred. She had to hide you. All of you. The paintings hold proof of everything. A crash from the hallway interrupted him. Derek burst in, waving papers. She kidnapped my son, he shouted. I have a court order. 2 police officers followed him. Run, Mr. Wilson urged. The house will protect you, like it protected Margaret from them. Sarah grabbed Tommy and ran. Behind them, alarms blared. Mr. Wilson had pulled out his IV, creating chaos to cover their escape. They made it to the car just as Jennifer appeared, clutching her stomach. Take me with you, she begged. They'll kill my babies to keep me quiet. Sarah hesitated for 1 second too long. Men in suits appeared at both ends of the corridor. Inside, Sarah pushed Jennifer into the car. They sped away as shots hit the parking lot concrete. The paintings, Jennifer gasped. They're not just valuable. They're evidence of what they did, what they're still doing. Who? Sarah demanded. The Wilsons, the real ones. James and Margaret were trying to stop them. Now you're part of it, because of what's in your blood, in your heart. Tommy spoke from the back seat. The lady says we have to hurry. They're coming to the house tonight. Sarah pressed the accelerator, hoping the old Honda would hold together long enough. Behind them, a convoy of black cars pulled out of the hospital parking lot. The race was on. The Honda's engine sputtered as Sarah turned onto the hidden driveway. The black cars had lost them twice, but they'd return soon. The house will seal itself once we're inside, Tommy announced. How do you know these things? Jennifer asked from the passenger seat, hands protectively over her stomach. The lady tells me. She says one of the babies will be like me. Inside, Sarah locked the doors while Jennifer collapsed on the couch. Tommy ran upstairs saying the lady needed him. Sarah found Margaret's diaries in the studio. The first entry was dated 1943. They're using the art market to hide their stolen wealth. Every painting holds a secret. James helps me encode the evidence, but they're getting closer. The child must be protected. Sarah, Jennifer called from below. Derek's here. Through the window, Sarah watched Derek arguing with men in suits. He pointed at the house, gesturing angrily. They're not here for Tommy anymore, Jennifer said. Derek told them about the paintings, about Margaret's evidence, a crash from upstairs. Sarah ran to find Tommy pushing aside a bookcase, revealing a hidden door. She says we need to see something, he explained. The door opened to a narrow staircase. In the basement, Tommy walked straight to a brick wall and pressed a specific stone. The wall slid open. A bunker, Sarah breathed. The hidden room contained filing cabinets and a small art vault. On a desk sat a leather journal, newer than the others. Margaret's last diary. Jennifer recognized it. Derek's been searching for it. Sarah opened it to find pages of codes and references to paintings. The final entry was dated just before Margaret's death. They think the evidence died with the other witnesses. They don't know about the paintings, the documents hidden in plain sight. Sarah must be protected. The house will recognize her, just as it will recognize her son. The truth about the Wilson fortune, about what they did to those families, it's all here. James will watch over them until it's time. Tommy picked up a photograph that fell from the diary. That's you, Mommy, with the lady. The photo showed Margaret holding a baby, Sarah. The same tumor-shaped birthmark visible on both their wrists. Sarah's chest tightened. The room spun. Your heart condition, Jennifer said. It's not a tumor. It's a genetic marker. Proof of your connection to Margaret. That's why they want you dead. Footsteps above. The men had found a way in. The tunnels. Tommy pointed to another hidden door. She says they lead to the lake. A phone rang, Jennifer's. They have Derek, she answered. He talked too much. No, please. Her scream echoed as she dropped the phone. They killed him. Said I'm next if I don't help them. Pain shot through Sarah's chest. She stumbled. Mom, Tommy caught her arm. She says we have to move now. Take the diary. Sarah thrust it at Jennifer. Get to the lake house. I'll slow them down. You'll die, Jennifer protested. The house will protect me. Go. After they disappeared into the tunnel, Sarah faced the studio door as footsteps approached. The lights flickered. Temperature dropped. Sarah felt a presence beside her. I know you're here, Margaret, she whispered. Help me protect them, like you protected me. The door burst open. 3 men entered, weapons raised. The paintings, one demanded. Where are they? Sarah stood her ground as the room grew colder. Suddenly, canvases flew off the walls. Paintbrushes launched like missiles. The men stumbled back as an unseen force filled the room. Sarah's birthmark burned. Her heart raced. Through the chaos, she glimpsed a female figure in white, standing between her and the intruders. Run, a voice whispered in her mind. The evidence is safe. Now save yourself. Sarah ran for the tunnel as the house itself seemed to come alive behind her. The truth about her past could wait. Right now, she had to survive to protect it. Sarah stumbled through the tunnel, her heart threatening to burst. Each step sent pain shooting through her chest. The sounds of chaos in the house faded behind her. Her phone lit the way until the battery died. In complete darkness, she felt along the wall following the sound of dripping water. Tommy, she called softly. Jennifer? No response. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber. Light filtered through cracks above. A ladder led to what looked like a boat dock. Sarah climbed, muscles screaming. At the top, she found an empty dock. No sign of Tommy or Jennifer. Her phone was dead. No way to call for help. Her chest pain intensified. A boat approached across the lake. Sarah ducked behind crates. Search the tunnels, a man ordered. The pregnant woman's bleeding. They can't have gone far. Bleeding. Jennifer was losing one of the twins. Sarah crept along the dock's edge. She had to find them before the searchers did. A child's shoe print in the mud pointed toward the woods. Tommy had left her a trail. She followed it to a small cabin. Inside, Jennifer lay on the floor, clutching her stomach. Tommy pressed a wet cloth to her head. The baby, Jennifer gasped. I can't feel one of them anymore. Sarah checked Jennifer's pulse. Too weak. They're blocking the roads, Tommy said. But she says there's another way. Through the old quarry. She? Jennifer asked through pain. Margaret. She's trying to save the other baby, like she saved Mom. Sarah's vision blurred. The room tilted. Your heart. Jennifer grabbed her hand. You need a hospital. We'll all die if they catch us. Sarah fought to stay conscious. Tommy, what does Margaret say? The quarry tunnels lead to the hospital. But, he hesitated. She says not everyone will make it. A boat engine roared closer. Go! Jennifer pushed them away. I'll tell them you went north. Save yourselves. No, Sarah tried to lift her. Together. Sarah, listen. Jennifer's voice shook. I helped Derek destroy your life. Let me do this one right thing. Footsteps approached outside. The back door. Tommy pulled Sarah's arm. Now. Sarah's heart felt like it would explode. But she ran. Behind them, Jennifer screamed as the men broke in. They reached the quarry as gunshots echoed across the lake. Jennifer, Sarah sobbed. Keep moving, Tommy urged. The baby she saved. It'll be important someday. The quarry tunnel entrance lay hidden behind vines. Inside, Sarah's strength finally failed. She collapsed. Mom, Tommy's voice seemed far away. Stay awake. Can't. The pain was unbearable now. She says your heart can't take much more. The hospital's close, but what? The men are there too, waiting. Sarah pulled Tommy close. Listen carefully. Find Mr. Wilson. Tell him I understand now. About Margaret. About everything. No, you have to come with me. Tommy, I can't. The tunnel spun. Promise you'll run. Don't stop until you reach Mr. Wilson. Mom, please. Sarah's heart spasmed. Her body went rigid. Through darkening vision, she saw a figure in white kneel beside her. Not yet, Margaret's voice echoed. Your story isn't over. Sarah felt invisible hands press against her chest. Energy surged through her body. Her heart jumped, steadied. That will buy you minutes, not hours. Margaret's voice faded. Run! Sarah staggered up. Every step was agony, but she ran. Tommy led them through twisting tunnels, following an unseen guide. They emerged behind the hospital as dawn broke. Armed men guarded the entrance. Service door, Tommy pointed. She says it's clear. They made it 3 steps inside before Sarah's heart gave out completely. She collapsed as alarms blared. Code blue, someone shouted. Get a crash cart. Mom! Tommy's scream faded as nurses pulled him back. Sarah felt herself floating away. Below, doctors worked frantically on her body. Above, Margaret waited with outstretched hand. The choice was hers. Clear. The defibrillator shocked Sarah's chest for the 3rd time. Her body arched off the table, then collapsed. From above, Sarah watched the medical team fight for her life. Margaret stood beside her, translucent in the harsh hospital lights, while doctors below continued compressions. Choose, Margaret said, but know the truth first. You've earned that much. The hospital scene dissolved. Suddenly, they stood in the house's studio in 1943. A younger Margaret worked frantically, photographing documents hidden within painting frames. Nazi gold, Margaret explained. Billions laundered through art sales. The real Wilsons, James's family, were bankers orchestrating the whole network. Every painting holds proof of a transaction. Every frame hides account numbers. The scene shifted. Margaret cradling baby Sarah, running through night streets. Your grandmother, my daughter, discovered their operation in 1975. They killed her, but not before she exposed part of their network. I hid you, changed your records, gave you to a trusted family. The birthmark you share with Tommy, it's genetic proof of your lineage, your claim to everything they stole. Images flashed, Margaret encoding bank records into paintings, James helping fake death certificates, infant Sarah being handed to her adoptive parents. The house chose you, like it chose me. The Wilson banking group has hidden their crimes for 3 generations. The paintings contain it all. Account numbers, transaction records, names of families they destroyed. Back in the present hospital room, doctors prepared another shock. Your heart condition, Margaret continued, isn't natural. They engineered a genetic marker to track our bloodline. Anyone with Wilson blood carries it. That's how they found you. Routine medical tests flagged the marker. Mom! Tommy's voice cut through. He'd somehow slipped past the nurses, evading hospital staff trying to remove him. Choose now, Margaret urged. But remember, only a living heir can expose them. Only you can finish what we started. Sarah chose life. Her body convulsed as she slammed back into it. Pain exploded through her chest as her heart restarted. Pulse, a doctor shouted. We have pulse! Sarah opened her eyes as armed agents burst into the room. FBI, everyone out. They aimed weapons at the hospital security guards. This patient's under federal protection. Mr. Wilson appeared in a wheelchair, pushed by a tall man in a tactical vest. Agent Roberts, FBI Art Crimes Division, the man showed his badge. We've been building this case since 1945. Mr. Wilson contacted us when you discovered the first painting. A nurse checked Sarah's vitals. BP dangerously low, heart rate irregular. Jennifer? Sarah managed to ask. She didn't make it, Agent Roberts said quietly. But her surviving twin is safe. We have him in protective custody. The men who were chasing us? Wilson Banking Group's private security team. We're rounding them up across 3 states. Their whole operation is collapsing. Sarah's chest seized again. Monitors screamed. Get her into surgery now, a doctor ordered. Her heart won't survive another episode. The genetic marker, Sarah gasped, is removable. Mr. Wilson wheeled closer. Margaret found the cure before they killed her. It's coded in the paintings, in colors, brush strokes. She hid it all in plain sight. The house? Secured by FBI tactical teams, Roberts assured her. The paintings are safe. We're decoding them now. Tommy squeezed Sarah's hand. She says you need surgery right away. She'll stay with me. Sarah saw Margaret nod behind him, a promise in her transparent eyes. One last thing. Mr. Wilson pulled out legal documents. Margaret's final will. She left everything to her granddaughter, you. The house, the paintings, the evidence. It's all yours now. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Had to be sure they took the bait. Needed them to show their hand, to prove they were still active. The surgical team arrived. Mom's fading, Tommy warned. She says there's no more time. Pain ripped through Sarah's chest, worse than ever. Or 3 is prepped, a nurse shouted. BP critical. As they rushed her down the hallway, Sarah saw Margaret follow, standing guard. Agent Roberts spoke rapidly into his radio. Package secure. Operation Margaret is live. All units move in. The OR doors loomed ahead. Sarah caught a final glimpse of Tommy with Mr. Wilson before the anesthesia took hold. Margaret's voice followed her down. Rest now, child. Your part in this fight is over. When you wake, we'll begin your new life. The truth about her past was finally revealed. But first, she had to survive to claim it. Sarah's heart monitor flatlined for the 4th time on the operating table. Crash cart, Dr. Morris shouted. We're losing her again. Through the haze of anesthesia, Sarah floated above her body, watching the surgical team fight for her life. The genetic marker in her heart had triggered a massive attack. The Wilson gene is attacking the transplant, a surgeon announced. We need the formula from Margaret's paintings. In the waiting room, Tommy sat with Agent Roberts, his small hands clutching Margaret's decoded diary. They're here, Tommy whispered suddenly. Derek brought bad men. Derek burst through the hospital doors with 3 armed men. Where's my son? He demanded. I have a court order. FBI, freeze! Roberts drew his weapon. Tommy slipped away during the chaos, following an unseen guide. This way, Margaret's voice directed him. To the laboratory. In the OR, Sarah's body convulsed with another attack. We can't keep her alive without the antidote, Dr. Morris wiped his forehead. The marker's killing her. The laboratory door burst open. Tommy ran in, Jennifer's surviving twin sleeping in a bassinet nearby. The painting code. He handed the diary to a startled technician. Hurry, Derek's men found them. Take both boys, Derek ordered. The Wilson gene is in their blood too. No! Jennifer appeared in the doorway, bleeding heavily from her wound. You won't touch them. She lunged at Derek, knocking him into his men. The antidote formula fell from the diary. Mom needs that. Tommy grabbed it. Jennifer blocked the doorway with her body. Run, Tommy. Save them both. Gunshots echoed through the corridor. In surgery, Sarah flatlined again. Time of death, Dr. Morris began. Wait! A nurse ran in with a vial. The antidote from Margaret's formula. Sarah's spirit hovered between worlds. Margaret stood before her. Choose quickly, Margaret urged. The boys need you. Jennifer, Sarah asked, gave her life to save them, like I did. Like you must live to protect them. Sarah chose life. Her heart restarted with the antidote. The genetic marker dissolved. She's stabilizing, Dr. Morris announced. The Wilson gene is neutralizing. FBI agents stormed the hospital. Derek and his men were cornered in the pharmacy. It's over, Agent Roberts declared. We found the Nazi accounts. The Wilson banking group is finished. Tommy appeared at Sarah's bedside as she woke. Jennifer, she whispered. Tommy shook his head. She saved us all, her baby too. The lady says they're together now. Through the window, Sarah saw Jennifer's spirit join Margaret's, both women standing guard. The genetic marker that had nearly killed her was gone. The truth about the Wilson fortune was exposed, but the cost had been high. Rest, Margaret's voice echoed. Your new life begins now. Sarah pulled Tommy close as FBI agents led Derek away. They had survived their greatest trial, but Margaret's work wasn't finished. The real transformation was about to begin. 3 months after her surgery, Sarah stood in Margaret's studio examining the last decoded painting. Her heart, now free of the genetic marker, beat steadily in her chest. The FBI's Art Crimes Division had just completed their final evidence catalog. The Wilson Banking Group's assets are frozen, Agent Roberts announced, closing his laptop. 47 arrests across 12 countries. The Swiss accounts are being traced to return funds to Holocaust survivors' families. And the house? Sarah asked. Legally yours, along with the entire estate. Margaret's will is ironclad. Tommy burst into the studio. At 7, he'd grown an inch since their ordeal began. Mr. Wilson's awake. He's asking for us. At the hospital, James Wilson sat up in bed, looking stronger than he had in months. The stroke damage had mostly reversed with therapy. The foundation paperwork is ready, he said, patting a folder. The Wilson Margaret Center for Arts and Healing. We'll use the recovered funds to help other families who've lost everything. Sarah examined the documents. The foundation would convert the house into a residential therapy center, combining art therapy with temporary housing for displaced families. The first residents would arrive next week. Jennifer's son will be raised here, Sarah said. When he's old enough, he'll learn the truth about his mother's sacrifice. The genetic marker is gone from his blood, too, Mr. Wilson confirmed. The doctors used Margaret's coded cure. He'll grow up free of their influence. A nurse entered with discharge papers. Ready to go home, Mr. Wilson? Home to the house, he smiled. Where I can watch my family grow. The house welcomed them with warm lights and fresh air flowing through open windows. The FBI teams had removed their equipment, leaving only the furniture and artwork Margaret had chosen decades ago. Sarah's phone buzzed. The hospital director. We've reviewed everything, he said. Your suspension is lifted. The board wants to partner with your foundation, provide medical care for your residents. Thank you, Sarah replied. But I'm not coming back. The center needs my full attention. She ended the call and watched Tommy in the garden, planting roses where Margaret's had once grown. The property's iron gates, now repaired, stood open to welcome their first families tomorrow. Agent Roberts' team had transformed the bunker into a secure art storage facility, protecting the remaining evidence. The decoded paintings hung in a special gallery, each one telling part of Margaret's story of resistance and hope. Sarah's chest tightened, but not from pain, from gratitude. 6 months ago, she'd lost everything. Now she had purpose, family, and a legacy to carry forward. A knock at the door revealed a woman clutching 2 small children's hands. I'm sorry. I know you're not open yet. But we had nowhere else to go. Come in. Sarah opened the door wider. You're exactly where you need to be. Tommy ran to greet them. I'll show them their rooms. The lady already picked them out. The children followed him upstairs, their mother crying in relief. In the studio that evening, Sarah found a new canvas on Margaret's easel. Beside it, brushes and paints waited. Mom, Tommy called. 3 more families just arrived. The police brought them. Sarah smiled. Margaret had known all along what the house would become. A sanctuary, like it had been for them. The doorbell rang again. A teenage girl stood shivering in the darkness. I saw your website, she whispered, about helping people start over. Welcome home, Sarah said. Upstairs, new voices filled the rooms. In the kitchen, Mr. Wilson taught the children to bake Margaret's cookie recipe. The house hummed with life and purpose. Sarah felt a familiar presence beside her as she showed the girl to her room. Thank you, she whispered to the empty air. For everything. The lights flickered once. Margaret's signature response. Outside her window, an FBI car patrolled discreetly. The Wilson Banking Group was finished, but Sarah knew to stay vigilant. Some of their allies remained free, but the house was secure. The truth was preserved in Margaret's paintings. And most importantly, families who'd lost everything could find hope here, just as she had. More buses coming, Tommy announced. The lady says we'll need more cookies. Sarah headed to the kitchen, passing the wall of photographs. Margaret, James, Jennifer, and all those who'd sacrificed to make this day possible. The genetic marker that had nearly killed her was now erased from their bloodline. Future generations would be free of the Wilson Banking Group's influence. But Margaret's real legacy lived on. The power of art to heal, the strength of starting over, and the importance of helping others find their way home. As Sarah began another batch of cookies, she touched the spot where her birthmark had been. The house creaked softly around her, a reminder that some inheritances weren't written in blood or DNA, but in choices and courage. Tommy helped the new children hang their drawings in the art room. Soon these walls would tell new stories of survival and hope. "Welcome to Margaret House," Sarah told the gathering families. "Let's begin again together." Outside, roses bloomed out of season in the garden. Inside, the sound of children's laughter filled every room. The house Margaret had protected for so long had finally become what she'd dreamed. A place where lost souls could rebuild their lives, one brushstroke at a time. And Sarah, who'd once had nothing, now had everything she never knew she needed: a home, a purpose, and a family bound by something stronger than blood. The real inheritance wasn't the house or the paintings or even the truth they preserved. It was hope. 1 year after Sarah first discovered Margaret's paintings, the Wilson Margaret Center for Arts and Healing celebrated its anniversary. Over 200 families had found sanctuary within its walls. Today, they gathered to honor those who'd made it possible. "Mom, they're ready for your speech," Tommy called from the garden. At 8, he'd become the heart of the center, helping new children adjust, and somehow always knowing which room would suit each family best. The garden had bloomed beyond its original boundaries, just like the center's mission. Former residents returned regularly to tend the flowers they'd planted during their stay. Each rose bush told a story of renewal. Sarah approached the podium set up on the lawn. Faces in the crowd reflected the center's impact. The teenage runaway now heading to college, the widow who'd rebuilt her career through art therapy, Jennifer's son sleeping peacefully in his adoptive mother's arms. "1 year ago, I lost everything," Sarah began. "My home, my job, my security. What I didn't know then was that losing everything would lead me to find something greater." Agent Robert sat in the back, still vigilant. The FBI maintained a protective detail, as several former Wilson Banking Group members remained at large. But their network was destroyed, their assets redistributed to victims' families. "Margaret Wilson left us more than paintings and evidence," Sarah continued. "She left us a blueprint for helping others heal. Every family that finds shelter here continues her legacy of resistance through compassion." Mr. Wilson watched from his wheelchair, now permanently residing in what he called the family wing. His recovery had plateaued, but his mind remained sharp. He spent his days teaching art classes and sharing Margaret's stories with new residents. "The genetic marker that once threatened our bloodline is gone." Sarah touched her chest where the surgical scar had faded. "But the real inheritance wasn't in our DNA. It was in Margaret's choice to fight injustice with hope." The center had expanded beyond emergency housing. Its art therapy program earned national recognition. Hospitals referred patients. Courts sent families needing fresh starts. The waiting list grew daily. "Today we're announcing the opening of 3 new facilities," Sarah revealed. Margaret houses in Boston, Chicago, and Seattle. The recovered Wilson assets will fund centers across the country, turning their dark legacy into light. Tommy stood to present the first Margaret Wilson Courage Award. The recipient, the police officer who'd helped Sarah that first night in the hospital and who now coordinated security for domestic violence survivors seeking shelter at the center. "The house chose us," Sarah concluded. "Now we choose to open its doors wider." After the ceremony, Sarah led a private tour for potential donors. The art gallery displayed Margaret's decoded paintings alongside residents' works. Each piece told 2 stories: the evidence of past crimes and the healing of present wounds. "The lady says more are coming," Tommy whispered as they passed the newest arrival, a mother and 3 children escaping an abusive home. She says they'll need the blue room. The blue room, named for the paint color Margaret had chosen decades ago, had an unusual history of housing families who went on to accomplish remarkable things. Somehow, Tommy always knew who belonged there. In the studio, Sarah examined her own recent paintings. She'd discovered a talent she never knew she possessed, her work selling at charity auctions to support the center's expansion. "You have her gift," Mr. Wilson said, wheeling into the studio. Margaret would be proud. The house's security system quietly monitored the grounds. Features added by the FBI blended seamlessly with the original architecture. Modern protection wrapped in historic grace, like everything else about Margaret House. Sarah's phone buzzed with updates from the other centers under construction. Architects had incorporated elements of the original house's design: the art studios, the secure rooms, the healing spaces. Margaret's vision multiplying across the country. In the kitchen, residents prepared dinner together, a nightly tradition that helped rebuild trust and community. The widow taught the teenage runaway her grandmother's recipe. The young mother watched her children laugh for the first time in months. "Jennifer's son is walking," Tommy reported, having just visited the nursery. "The lady says he'll be an artist too." Sarah smiled. Jennifer's sacrifice had saved not just her son, but helped expose the truth that freed them all. Her story was woven into the center's foundations, her courage remembered. The day ended with their newest tradition, gathering in the gallery as the sun set, sharing stories of those who'd found their way to Margaret House. Names were never used, but hope echoed in every tale. "Tell us about Margaret," the children always begged. So Sarah would recount the story of a woman who fought evil with art and compassion, who protected future generations with coded paintings and hidden truths. Later, in the quiet of Margaret's studio, Sarah reviewed applications from families seeking shelter. The house still spoke to her in subtle ways: a door that opened at the right moment, lights that guided late-night arrivals, warm rooms on cold nights. Tommy had inherited more of Margaret's intuition, his connection to the house's mysteries deeper than Sarah's. But they each played their part in continuing her work. The genetic marker that had nearly killed them was erased, but Margaret's real legacy grew stronger every day. In art therapy sessions where trauma survivors reclaimed their voices, in children playing safely in the garden, in families rebuilding what others had destroyed. "We're expanding the East Wing," Sarah told the empty studio. 10 more rooms. I think you'd approve." The lights flickered once, Margaret's eternal response. Outside her window, roses bloomed in the moonlight. Inside, the sound of life and healing filled every room. Sarah touched the fabric of her mother's life at last. Not in DNA or birthmarks or genetic markers, but in choices, in resistance, in compassion, in the power of art to speak truth and light to show the way home. The house Margaret had protected now protected others. The truth she'd preserved in paintings now preserved hope for generations. The legacy she'd hidden now stood in plain sight, growing stronger with each family that found sanctuary within these walls. And Sarah, who'd once lost everything, had found what Margaret had known all along: that true inheritance isn't counted in bank accounts or bloodlines, but in lives transformed and hearts healed. The story wasn't over. It never would be, as long as there were those who needed to begin again. But now they had a place to start.